Hello, I'm Lauren Cedarson, and I have my co-host with me today, Diana Longer, to help me out, the former mayor of Maplewood. And we're going to be discussing some issues, and we're going to go reach back into history a little bit. As some of you may know, I spent 4 years on the Grant City Council pushing for road and infrastructure repair. And one of the problems we've had is flooding. And south of Highway 12, there's a little community neighborhood. It's called Sunnybrook, and there's a little lake, but it's kind of landlocked, and they've had problems. And some of these houses are right on the lake, but when the water level goes up 2 feet, then it starts to flood the homes. And this is something that's happened before. It happened in 2017, and guess what? It's happening again this year. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back. Larry Lanu and myself were on the council, and we spearheaded the action to get Valley Branch Watershed to do something. Our mayor, Jeff Huber, wanted to put it off 30 days for the next city council meeting. But if your house is being flooded, you don't necessarily want to wait 30 days to have someone discuss the problem. So Larry and I worked with Valley Branch. We also worked with Fran Myron, a county commissioner for our area, and we got some actions done where they put in a couple of pumps and pumped it across the road with down a 1,000-foot tube or hose into a sandy area, low area that is sandy and would accept it by the Indian Hills Golf Course. And Mike Regan was very good about that. He let him do that, and that took care of the problem. Of course, then they ended up raising the road.
And of course, he's affiliated with the Indian Hills Golf Course, correct?
Yes, he runs the Indian Hills Golf Course, and of course, his father owns Premier Banks. So a very nice old family. So what I'm going to show you now is reaching back to 2017, how we attacked the problem and the solutions we came up with. And the important thing is, coming up this time, the residents didn't even feel comfortable talking to the city council with the new city council, in addition to the 3 old cronies they have on there, because they were afraid of retribution. So we went to the Valley Branch and worked something out with them. But here's what happened in 2017. So if we could play that clip, please, we'll talk on the other side.
So this is actually at the Valley Branch meeting.
Valley Branch Watershed meeting.
Okay, excellent. Well, let's take a look.
Commissioner Fran Myron, he also met with me down there, and we found some millings to raise both Keats and Jocelyn Road over there, very helpful for the emergency response vehicles and school buses and the daily traffic that goes on through there. We want to thank Mr. Myron for his work on that. One of the concerns I have is that we have a city council that doesn't seem to work with the watershed nearly as well as our county commissioners do. Now, some of you are aware at the pond across from Keats Avenue, there's a berm there already. Our city went in there and dug into that berm and opened that up, which allowed more water to get into the Keats Pond. I think was great. The homeowner since then has backfilled and filled that pond in. I don't think that opening of that berm was done through the permitting through the Valley Branch Watershed. Currently, we just put in a guardrail. It just got installed probably last week. And you just drove down there on Keats, you see the guardrail pretty much out into the road. There is no shoulder for that to be put on. On the west side of that road, they're going to be permitted, and you're asking to fill in wetlands on the west side of that property. When I came to this meeting, when Mr. Dave Busick was there, he indicated that the Keats Avenue Road is not even owned by the city of Grant. That is actually on private property. That means that the watershed is well aware of it. The city of Grant may be well aware of it. And right now they want to get a permit from you right now to fill the bank on the west side. I would ask that this body withhold and give the homeowner that owns that property the opportunity to file a data request from both the county, the watershed, and the city of Grant to find out where is the established property line, when was it established, can you fill and encroach on his property? Is he right to get paid? And has there been any finding of facts? Has anybody established, we can establish the center of the road, but they haven't established for that homeowner the actual property lines. So before this body issue any permits to allow that filling on the west side of the road, I'd ask that he be given the opportunity to file a data request form from these three bodies and get the information so he can assess it, turn it over to his attorney for review before the watershed simply issues them a permit and they are involved in more litigation than they need to be.
We'll take that under advisement. Thank you.
There was a whole can of worms because they ended up raising the road. We got the county involved. They helped us out. So that was working with multiple governmental agencies, and we solved the problem at that point in time. Now, the second guardrail still isn't there.
Right, now, so this filling in of that wet side of the road, how did that relate to the flooding issue that the residents were experiencing?
Well, the problem was the road is like a dam, and the water, there's a little culvert, but it cannot handle all the water. So what it was doing, it was backing up and it was going over the road. And so they couldn't go down the road if there were fire department issues. And of course, the city never notified the fire department or anybody in the county, so no one knew what was going on. And so then the county got involved and they donated a bunch of recycle, and the contractors built it up. But then it was a high bank, and they wanted to do something, so they quickly put in a guardrail on the east side. Well, they actually widened the road a little bit, but in order to put a second guardrail, they needed another 8 feet. And come to find out, the city didn't own the land. So this was impeding, the progress.
Right, so they didn't actually even have right-of-way in order to put that shoulder there for the widened road and to be able to put in the guardrail.
And then, of course, this year has been a very, very wet year. We had over 8 inches of rain in May alone. And so there's been a lot of flooding. Water's high all over the place. Matter of fact, on 96 and Gateway Trail, the water from that lake to the south of it was actually going over the road. So there have been some issues. So here this rears its ugly head again. And before, Mr. Lanou and another gentleman put in a couple of pumps to pump it down so the flooding would go away. Well, this year, the same thing has happened again. It happened about 2 weeks ago. But they didn't even involve the city of Grant because it's just a big fiasco. And one of the things that
and generally, most of the time, residents believe and think that it is the duty of the municipality that they live in, that if the roads are flooding, that municipality is going to have some hand in solving the problem, because that's one of the essential services that most people identify as something that their municipality would be in charge of, in addition to public safety and other types of essential services that you consider as part of what City Hall provides.
Right, and Mayor Huber and Deputy Mayor Carr fought us tooth and nail in every road policy we tried to come up with. It's really interesting because we'll see later in the show all the things that I had talked about in my 4 years on the council. They're now saying, oh yeah, the roads are going to be a problem, we have to do something, and maybe we should do this. And you're kind of looking at, but we'll touch on that later. Now we just went down to we went down to Valley Branch again. And why don't we play that clip? And we will talk on the other side.
And approximately when did you go to Valley Branch watershed recently?
That was June, that'd be about 6th or 8th, something like that.
Yeah, okay.
Right now, we'll be pumping probably for about another, I'm gonna guess 2 or 3 weeks. And you will see that berm, which is west of Keats, start showing up again. Right now, the water's over there.
Yeah, right.
And simply put a culvert in there with a gate that you can open up and let more water get to the Keats Pond, then you can keep maintaining your level, because buying homes is not going to eliminate any water. That system would, and for a whole lot less money for the taxpayers. So it's something to consider, but I believe, I brought a statute for you today, and I'm sure you guys are aware of it, but Uniform Municipal Contracting Law. They raised the dollar value from $100,000 to $175,000 before you have to go out for competitive bidding. So you would still have to get a bid from two people, but by getting two bids without advertising for a bid and going through all that, you can save yourself a lot of advertising, engineering, and I'm here to tell you today that you get a set of pumps with that. Right now I've got 2 pumps in there with a 4-inch force main on each one of them, and they're spooled up to a 6-inch, so that's why I'm filling a 6-inch pump.
They very wisely, we put that in, they very wisely decided to keep it in till October. And they had another engineering company come in, and it was $14,000 for the first month, and then there was going to have a maintenance fee because they were going to have to put diesel pumps in there. So again, this is an electric pump because Larry's an electrician. His career is he wires sewer lift stations, so he's very familiar with these types of things. Him and another gentleman went together and put it in. The city of Grant isn't even aware of what's going on. Now what they're thinking about doing is they may buy out some of the houses and make a park out of that place. That's the kind of the underground, behind the scenes situation that's going on.
And I think that in that clip we saw that Mr. Lanou was making the point that doing the fixes that he was proposing would be certainly much more economical than having to buy out 4, 5, 6 houses that are constantly being flooded out.
Well, the interesting is Mr. Regan that runs the Indian Hills Golf Club, it's a problem for him too. So Larry had suggested that they buy an easement that of course it jointly benefits the Indian Hills Golf Club. And so when this problem comes again, they have the pump set in there, it's ready to go. You just have to pull them out in the fall, put them in the spring. And I believe to solve this problem for this year, it's only $20,000. Mm-hmm. So if they bought the pumps, it wouldn't be much more than that. It would just take it in, take it out. It would be a very simple solution to a recurring problem.
And would it be the city of Grant that would be doing the pump?
Valley Branch Watershed would be doing that.
Okay, so it would be the branch the watershed that would be doing that.
Because the city, they'd goof it up. I mean, we had a little pump house up on the north end, this is a few years ago, and the go-around we had with that was just, I mean, these guys are just incompetent. They don't know up from down. And, but again, this is a recurring problem. There's a solution, an economical solution, I might add, rather than buying 10 houses at $400,000 or $500,000 a piece out and making it into a park. And it's a beautiful little neighborhood down there. There's probably about 12, 15 homes around a little tiny lake, and very nice kind of, you go through a bunch of wooded section, and then all of a sudden here's this little community with lots.
And I would think that the residents that live in that area, because of how you describe it, it sounds like the type of area that most people are thinking sounds like a great place to live, that it is still a neighborhood, and yet you've got the great outdoors, you've got the lake, you've got all of that. And I would think that they would want to be able to keep their homes and not have to relocate. And so that they would be very supportive of the fix rather than the buyout.
Yes, I would think so too. But again, the residents didn't bring this up to the city because of the big mess it was last time, and then nothing happened anyway, and let's talk about it in the June meeting. Well, like I said, when your house is getting flooded, you're not going to want to wait 30 days to talk about a solution.
Right, and that's a great way to disenfranchise the residents of your community, that you have something of a timely matter on the agenda, and then when they all get there, then you say, oh, whoops, we're going to table this and put it on an agenda sometime in the future or next month, because now they feel like they're not worth the time and effort of that council, and they don't come back the next time because they're going, well, what's the point?
Yeah, there's been so many problems with that. The other thing, like we've been talking about, we're kind of morphing into the next situation. The meetings have been, every meeting this year has been under 40 minutes. They load up the consent agenda, and you know there is no discussion on things on the consent agenda unless it's pulled, and that's one of the things Larry Lanou and I tried to do, pull things on the consent agenda, and Robert's rules says have emotion, and if one person can pull a item from the consent agenda, well, they changed the rules. Oh, it's got to be a motion, and a second, it has to be voted on by the majority. So they would load up the consent agenda with things they didn't want to talk about or the public to know about. Also, just kind of like public comment. There's no public comment anymore. They quit filming it. I got the DVD to watch it. In the first 4 minutes is blank because there isn't public comment and they don't have it. But let's play the next clip and we'll talk on the other side.
Very much. Looking for an approval of the consent agenda, please.
I would move there as well.
And do I have a second? Very good. All those in favor of approval, please signify by saying aye. Aye. And those opposed. Thank you, gentlemen. We'll move.
There.
So
You
what-
notice one member was also absent.
Yes. So what strikes me is that you've got the consent agenda, and they don't even list off what the items are on the consent agenda. Now, many communities, even though they may load up the consent agenda with many items that they don't want to talk about or whatever, they at least read through what that list of consent agenda items are, so the people who are either in the audience at the council meeting or watching it over the cable cast or through the internet, that they have an understanding of what there is on that consent agenda, or that they will have the consent agenda, the words overlaid on top of the video so that you can read what is on that consent agenda. But here, we're in the dark. There could have been 20 items on that consent agenda, or there could have been one. We don't know.
Well, the other interesting thing that they do is when you have a public hearing for a conditional use permit, that's at the Planning Commission. They may, and you have all the people coming to the city council meeting to comment on the conditional use permit, whether it's a solar garden or whatever else it is, and they say, no, that you missed it. It was at the public comment. Was at the Planning Commission. And sometimes they say you don't need a conditional use permit, like with that former hockey arena that they built. Well, it never ended up being a hockey arena, but it was a 100 by 300 foot building. And Mayor Carr said, well, these horse farms have big buildings. You've got 58 acres. You build whatever you want. You don't need a conditional use permit. Well, the other thing, follow up with that same philosophy. There was Roots Farm when I was on the, right after I got off the city council, they talked about this guy bought the 45-acre farm, and he had 7 children. 3 or 4 were special needs. I kind of assumed some of them must have been adopted. And then he was going to set this farm up with 3 young ladies to be caretakers, and he was going to also bring in other mentally impaired youngsters to teach them how to weed and give them job skills. Well, the mayor then again said, oh, you don't need a conditional use permit for that. Just go ahead and do what you're going to do. They can, later we'll build a little arena that they can do different activities in. Well, I just had a neighbor come over that lives across the street from there. These people are now want to put in a parking lot with 2 driveways for the buses to come in and out of. And on the website, it's $280 for however long to register kids. So they're running a full-blown school right under the radar. Oh, you don't need a CUP. And these people, and the man that was there has a beautifully restored brick farmhouse, and he also built a copy of the original barn, and it's very, very upscale. We're talking very upscale. And then they're going to put this special needs thing in right across the street. We already have Cedar Ridge Residential Treatment Center.
Right, and it's one thing if it was as it was being presented to the council, but in essence what has evolved is that it's actually a day school. And a day school has different type of usage than what is the usage that was being represented at the time in front of the council. And so you mentioned that there's buses coming through and that there's that traffic issue. And you're right, when you've got buses coming into a day school, now you have to consider access issues, you have to consider noise issues, you have to consider screening issues. There's a lot of those types of concerns that would be addressed in a conditional use permit, which allows a use that is not typically allowed in that area.
The other thing that's interesting.
So if under the zoning, if a day school isn't currently allowed under the zoning, they would need a conditional use permit.
Well, furthermore, they're gravel roads, so we're going to have these buses going down gravel roads, raising a lot of dust, a lot of them coming and going. I think it's somewhat problematic. But let's go to the next clip and we'll talk on the other side.
About consideration of the 2019 special road projects. Brad, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. Tonight, I'm looking for a discussion on the 2019 Special Roads Project. The budget for the Special Roads Project in 2019 is of roughly $77,000 now. Many of you know in the years past, we've done some patching, we've done some seal coating, we've done some overlays, we've done some culvert work, we've done some guardrails, and some drainage improvements. So those would be all good candidates for the Special Roads Project. Now, staff has gathered a few listed projects here for you on the memo. The first one is to repair a subgrade for 110th Street. We've had some issues this spring with some frost boils, and so we would like to take care of some of those issues. The second project that we have listed here is seal coating of Kimbrough Avenue. This project would be from 75th Street all the way to Delwood. We also have some crack filling of streets that we've identified through our pavement study that we did 2 or 3 years ago that we could use some of this money to do some crack filling, and we would like to get that done. We also have listed here some drainage and culvert improvements on 99th Street, Court and Lane, and then also some road restriction signs, load limit signs on our streets and Grant. So I guess with that, I would open the discussion.
They have a whole potpourri. What's interesting is they have other projects that they've never completed. For example, along, I think it's 83rd along Woodpile Lake, they did 2/3 of a guardrail. And interestingly enough, the last time a car went off that road was in 1998. So the prioritization leaves a great deal to be desired. And they only had enough money, so they only went 2/3 of the way down. And so, hey, that's long forgotten. And Keats Avenue is going to come up again. And they decided to do it in thirds rather than, as long as the contractor was out there, just do the whole thing. Well, the last third of Keats Avenue up by the Indian Hills has languished for 2 years. They haven't done anything. They never got back to it. And so it's laughable, their approach to this. And I think last month when we did the show, we could have brought that clip up where all of a sudden now the sky is falling. I explained that to when I was on the council, that we're going to be like Afton. The roads are all going to get so bad that they're going to have to go out and pave everything at once and bond and reach your bonding limit. Well, hey, they didn't want to hear anything about that. Again, last city council, not just June's, but May's, the sky is falling. We got to do something with the roads. Well, gee whiz, what's changed in less than a year? My words exactly. And so their willy-nilly approach to roads is just ridiculous.
Well, and I want to bring something else up as well, in that our last program, we talked about their special assessment policy for residents who live along or near these roads that they're going to do road reconstruction work on. And that at the end of our program, we had the clip and had underneath it that the special assessment road policy is based on the squeal factor. Now, I've had a number of people who have asked me, what does that mean, the squeal factor? Well, you know, I thought this would be an excellent time to let people know what that squeal factor is. It's whether or not the amount that you have determined to be your special assessment amount is too high that people are going to start complaining. So you want to be right below the squeal factor, that it's high enough but not so high that people are going to challenge it in court on the basis that it violates a Minnesota state statute. And you noticed how at that council meeting in May, when the city planner, that we saw the city engineer there, that when he started to talk about, well, you know, the properties along the roads are like $400,000 to $500,000 worth in value. So we basically feel that $8,000 to $9,000 as an estimate for those special assessments will be comparable, and he wanted to go on into saying how it would be appropriate for people who's got properties that are $500,000 worth. And you notice how Mayor Huber stopped him and said, okay, you've gone far enough, you've gone far enough. That's because Mayor Huber knows that that basis that the engineer was talking about is not the legitimate basis for how you set your special assessments. Special assessments can't be any higher than what that project increases your property in market value. So if the property doesn't increase in value that $8,000, that $10,000 worth as a result of that project, well, then it's unconstitutional and illegal under the Minnesota statutes. But you see, the mayor wanted to stop the engineer from saying anything more because that could have been used against them in court. And that's why we called it the squeal factor, because it's based upon not the rational basis of market values and increases in market values or anything at all. It's about what amount can they get away with that they're figuring that people who have $500,000 homes won't figure it is worth their while to challenge a special assessment that's $8,000 to $10,000 worth because they have to go out and make a living to pay for their $500,000 home, and they don't have time to fiddle around in court challenging the city who's done an improper special assessment. That's the squeal factor. So I thought it would be good to clarify that for our viewers.
Well, the problem, we have a Neanderthal road policy. Most cities, well, first of all, the background is 50% of the roads in Grant are state and county roads, so those people pay no money towards road repair. So you just lost half the people there. Then if you want your road fixed, if it's $500,000, there's 10 people on it, it's 50 grand. If there's 20 people on it, it's 25 grand. And they may kick in nickels and dimes, but it's just ridiculous. Now they changed the road policy, but not substantially. They're still not taxing the people that are on county and state roads to contribute. My suggestion was...
And so they really, what you're saying they should do is that they don't really have special assessments, that they really, because 50% of the population are living on streets that aren't municipal roads anyway, that they shouldn't be relying on special assessments. Instead, what they should be doing is that they should have it as a line item in their operational budget. So when they set their tax levy every year, they are actually funding their road improvement and reconstruction projects through the operational budget and through the general collection of property tax collection.
Yes, I had proposed $25 per 100,000 of value and go into a fund for road repair. Years ago when Carr came in, there was, $300,000-$400,000 set aside for road repair, and he just cut the taxes for the next year way down.
And depleted the fund.
and depleted the fund. And so that's kind of, and the next clip we have, they're going to talk about road budget. So let's play that and we'll talk on the other side.
Special road projects, we really have, Sharon could correct me, something like 200,000 total in there? Is that correct?
Sharon, can you step up, or Kim, do you want to answer Tom's
Or
question?
Or Kim can?
Mayor and council members, on your 2019 approved budget, it is 208,000, but we reserve the funds for the, putting in the guardrail out on Jocelyn.
Right.
So that is minus some dollars, minus also some, the seal coat from last year. I've got that we're at about 163,000.
Yeah, I just for the record, because in our budget, if somebody was gonna look, they say, well, you don't have 77,000, you've got 200 and some thousand. So roughly then we have 160,000 to actually spend, because we had some carryover, we were buying down we're spending a little our reserves, correct, Sharon, based on your best judgment on that we're still good on, wasn't that correct?
Right. So the question is, how far does 160,000 go in doing road reconstruction projects or even repairs? I mean, that's the real question, and that's not the question they're asking.
Well, that's just it. They're just giving a lick and a promise to everything. You know, they carry stuff over. Now, there's something else that'll come out. They have a special crack fill budget too. And the right hand doesn't know what the left hand's doing. And now all of a sudden, they're trying to do something about the road. Oh, we're going to fill the cracks. We have a special budget. And they don't know what in the world's going on.
Okay,
They've got these-
this is the first I've ever heard of a line item in a budget for a crack filling
Operation.
operation. Now, so that leads me to the puzzling question of how wide does the crack have to be to qualify for the crack filling budget line item?
Well, they have no standards. It's interesting, Joliet, which is a feeder for Woodland Acres in Victoria Station additions, and that's roughly 70 people in Woodland Acres, 70 homes, and there's probably 20 or 30, there's about 30 in Victoria Station. That is the road that's the main access. Well, that's been talked about for years. Well, now they're out there. It was so bad they directed the company to fill the potholes. Well, you drive down Joliet, there, in terms of the old street, there's more filling than there's more new black than there is old street. And it's just absolutely ridiculous. But now we're gonna head out and talk, we talked about Keats before. They're gonna babble about why it didn't get done and the ifs, ands, and buts. So if we could play the next clip, please.
And we didn't have a more serious, thank you, Sharon, more serious issue is I don't see the rest of Keats, to finish Keats. The question I would have on Keats, the rest of Keats, is what is the cost benefit to that? I'm not sure how bad that is, the last section, and if it's worth it to do it now. Before, I didn't want to do it because we had other more important projects like the guardrail and some things. So I would just throw that out there to add it to our list and not forget about it. And if it's possible we can do it and it's a cost benefit, then we'll do it. If it's not, then we won't. Does that make sense? We haven't finished it.
Yeah, so I think the last section that we did was around $40,000. So we originally, I think we were breaking that up into thirds, and we've done 2/3 of it. And I don't know that the road that hasn't been overlaid yet is any worse or any better than it was, or the other two, better than the other two sections. So it certainly would be a good candidate.
We are talking Keats north from 36, correct?
Yep, so it would be north of 60, I
Okay.
think we just stopped short of 65th Street, so it would be 65th up to where Keats turns to gravel.
We're gonna need, and let me interrupt you here. We're gonna need a council discussion on that in a lot more depth before we do that. That is not going to be added, in my opinion, to a special roads project. We had talked about that before in terms of assessments, not just doing it. We had some long talks on that. Kim?
Mayor and council members, and for the new council members, I will just note there was, when there was the potential of doing that third section, there was a lot of discussion, and from what I recall from that, that section, the reason the two sections were done is because they were underwater. There was water corroding those sections.
The paving of Keats.
Yes, and when those two sections were done, that problem was eliminated. The rest of the section does not have that water issue.
Oh, okay, just good memory.
Yeah,
I
it
didn't
also,
remember that.
it also, yeah, that was under the rubric of a special roads project, the same way that Jamaica Avenue North would be, or South would be, coming down the hill, as everyone knows, as you come down the hill to 75th, we were having a number of washout issues there. So the water was accelerating, washing out the gravel there quite badly at the bottom, and was making it quite hazardous. So that was considered a special roads project in order to, just like a guardrail.
Yeah, you know, I don't remember that road Keats being underwater. That's the road where there's a Hool's feed store on 36 and go north from there. It doesn't make sense. It's not quite a mile long. It doesn't make sense to divide it in thirds and do it in thirds. You're paying the cost, the travel cost to get the equipment out there, the setup fees. Why didn't you just do the whole thing?
Well, what I find interesting is that you were on the council at that time. You don't recall that Keats was underwater. And apparently Mayor Huber, who was also on the council back then, he doesn't recall that it was underwater either. So was it really actually ever underwater? Or has the city clerk confused Keats with a different street that was underwater and that the work had to be done? We don't know. And you see, this council isn't asking for any verification. And I really like his comment that he made where he says, well, we can't really talk about Keats right now because we're going to have an in-depth council discussion in the future. And I'm wondering, Mr. Cedarstrom, when and how will they have this in-depth council discussion? Because I don't see that the newest council members discuss anything at all.
They don't. And what's going to be decided, Huber and Carr are going to chat back and forth. They're going to come up with it. And the new Danny Kopp, I was just surprised. He's actually started talking. When I was on the council, he hardly ever said anything, except when he refused to apologize for calling me a liar. And we played that. But anyway, it's just crazy. There's no discussion. There's very little going on. Everything's hodgepodge. You might as well just throw darts at different things, you know, and they have unfinished projects like the Keats, the guardrail. They still haven't got the second guardrail up on Keats either. They did get the road raised. If it wouldn't have been for Fran Myron and the Washington County donating the materials, we'd have never had that happen either. But it's just like it's the blind leading the deaf, dumb, and stupid. It's just pathetic. Now we're going to come to that thing that we talked about earlier, the crack fill. It's all of a sudden there's daylight in the swamp. Oh, we didn't know we had a crack filling budget. But anyway, let's play the next clip and we'll talk on the other side.
And the seal coating on these streets here, what is the reason for that? And we're calling this a special roads project. Can you give me sort of the thinking behind that? Why have we classified it
Well,
that way?
typically what we would do is we would crack fill any street that had cracks every 15 or 20 feet to fill the cracks before, or so the water wouldn't, penetrate the road underlaying base and gravel and through frost or through the freeze-thaw cycle. If you get water in those cracks, it's going to break up the road
Right.
a lot quicker. So it's preventative medicine.
Right. So these particular roads you've identified then as particularly valuable to get to kind of step out of the normal process and the normal scheduling system that we have in place here in order to do this work, because you see great potential for us to save money if we do this work now on these streets.
Correct.
Is that a fair characterization of that?
Yep, correct.
Okay, that's kind of what I was getting to, that normally they stay within that schedule, and if you're asking us to step outside that schedule, there must have been a good reason for it, and I think...
Yeah. We didn't get to the part where they said they had a special crack filling budget of $66,000 left or something. But yeah, that's real interesting. Again, right hand doesn't know what the left hand's doing. Spending only a half an hour in each meeting, putting everything in consent agenda. They don't know what's going on. The citizenry doesn't know what's going on. you know, it's kind of interesting because they get roughly $200 a month to go to attend these meetings. Well, they've got it down to a half an hour, so they're making the equivalent of $400 an hour.
Wow.
And earlier in his tenure, the mayor said, well, I'm just a part-time mayor. Well, now he's a part-time mayor with his half-an-hour meetings. And it's just ridiculous.
And keep in mind, they only have a meeting once a month. So it's not like the city of Maplewood where they meet twice a month. It's only once a month.
Absolutely. Well, now we're coming to the subject of McCusick Road. McCusick Road is kind of a angled road that goes from Highway 96 to Manning Avenue at kind of a 45-degree angle and goes by the Gost House. It was a county road until about 20 years ago. Then they repaved it and turned it over to the city of Grant. And so it's got at least 4 inches of asphalt on there, but it's very badly broken up. And when I was on the council, I worked with our previous engineer, Phil Olson, and we had a proposal to patch the holes, because it's very, very bad. I mean, cars have had their tires and rims injured on that road. To patch it and do an overlay for $135,000. Well, when they brought this, because under the road policy, you meet with the local neighborhood and see what they want to do. They never mentioned the patch and overlay for $135,000. They said, well, we have to do a major reconstruction. It's $450,000, and there's only 10 people that live on the road. Well, who is going to kick up $45,000 to have the road repaired? They didn't want no part of it. And one of the other brilliant ideas Huber had way back when is, well, we can fix that. We'll just put a cul-de-sac at the end and then people can't go through. Another one was, oh, maybe we'll turn it back to gravel. Well, it's just as expensive to turn it back to gravel just about as it is to pave it. It's about 25% less, because you have to still haul all the stuff out and
Right.
whatever.
And you got to have the proper base, because if you don't have the proper base, your gravel road is going to wash out and it's not going to be maintainable anyway.
Oh, and they didn't want to hear about that. But it's interesting because McCusick's rearing its ugly head again, and here's former Mayor Tom Carr talking about it. So let's play that clip and we'll talk on the other side.
Finishing it, we just put it off because we have more important. So if let's just see how much money's here. Let's double check what we talked about on Keats and be done with that if we can.
Yeah.
If not Keats, then McCusick, Jeff, were you working on something with that? Was there some money coming, or what was going on with that?
Yeah, we reached out to several sources for grants on that. We had actually applied for grants on that. Unfortunately did not get grants on that. I know that the neighbors on McCusick have absolutely no interest and have expressed that multiple times in being part of a road improvement project on that one. So not sure. That's something we can certainly bring up in our budgeting process that we get into in August. But at this point, I'd kind of like to get the staff investigating these so we can get a cost on these.
No, I understand that, but what
Yeah.
I'm trying to get at and to look at forward thinking, depending on what that cost is, as long as we have some council time and we can talk about it, I'd like to find out what the council thinks on these other projects, if we have extra money. I'm not a fan of letting it sit in the bank if we can put it on the streets. So that's my thought. And one other thing before, if I could, I know the neighbors aren't interested in doing anything, but that road's costing us quite a bit to patch and keep patching and keep patching. So if we have extra money and we don't have another way to spend it, which is fine, then, and if we're not gonna do Keats, I'd say we come in from each end and at least do some grading or some overlaying on a couple of these, start on the ends and just go as far as we can to do some overlaying or the middle, just on the worst parts of that road to keep our pothole patching costs down if we have extra money, that's all.
What's interesting is my proposal was $135,000 to do the whole road. They're spending $30,000 a year just patching. It's all patches, just like Joliet currently is. There is not you cannot go 10 feet without seeing a patch somewhere on the road. I mean, it looks like it's polka dotted, honest to goodness. And McCusick's the same thing, and now they're worrying about it after the fact, and the idea that I had was no good and I could have done it economically. I mean, that overlay would have lasted 10 years. So if
Well,
you,
and your idea, you actually came to by doing that extra research and reaching out to the right people that you needed to reach out to, and you actually got estimates. So it wasn't just some number that you pulled out of your hat somewhere.
I worked with the engineer, you're right, and he has since left. He went, I'm not sure which municipality he went to, but he's a full-time engineer for someone in the metropolitan area.
But I understand that you went back into your archives.
Yes, and I
to
have pulled
take-
out a couple clips. Yes, I
Okay,
do.
well, tell our viewers a little bit about the history behind these clips, because they're about McCusick Road too, aren't they?
Yes, they are. And of course, Larry Lanou was saying, well, why don't we spend a little bit more money and just have a whole rebuild? And it's probably, 3 times as much to do a complete rebuild as it is to do a patch and overlay. And they just patch the bad points, and if they patch them properly, they put hot tar down liquid, and then they put the hot and roll it. Then when they get the whole thing smoothed out, they take and put a complete, 3 inches compacted to 2 or 2.5 inches down through the whole thing. And as long as, in a couple of years you do a seal coat, and it's good for 10 to 15 years. There's currently a patch in front of the mayor's and deputy mayor's house that is approximately 12 years old. That's the only stretch in that road, and it's just one half, the east lane, that does not have a chip in it. But we're going to listen to Larry Lanou talking about McCusick and how much it costs to fix.
And what year is this?
This is probably, 2016.
Okay.
Heard you right, you said we're gonna do a mill and overlay on this.
We're not doing a mill, Larry, I may have just stated that. We're gonna be just doing a overlay on top of the existing pavement.
Now there's a pot and patch, and then you're gonna pothole and patch whatever we have, and then do an overlay.
We are, yeah, so we would be putting down the sealant before we do the overlay, which is
Yeah.
a little different than what we've been doing on Keats. What that sealing will do is hopefully bind
Bind it to the
bind it
existing.
together so
Yep.
the cracks don't reflect sooner than later.
No, I mean, my question was because I heard you say milling, at least if my hearing is still good. And then I started looking at some of the core samples on the existing road, and they're 2 inches.
Yeah, and that's,
And you couldn't do a mill, you can't do a mill on a 2-inch road.
you would have to do.
You tear it up,
you'd
you'd have to
do a-
totally reconstruct.
You'd have to do a full depth mill, and we talked about that at the neighborhood meeting, Councilmember Lanou, that the pavement course that we did take would not be a.
Would not-
this
would not
project
allow that.
Would not support a mill and overlay project. We talked about doing a full depth
Yep.
mill of the pavement. I think the additional cost of $10,000 or $11,000 kind of pushed people towards this, just over.
So to do a complete mill and overlay, or a total reconstruction, about a $10,000 or $11,000 difference.
Well, no, if we were.
Total
to do a
reconstruction.
Total if we were to do a total, say,
Reconstruct.
reclaim project,
Yes.
that's more in the ballpark of about $90,000 to $100,000. But what we're talking about is just going over the top of the existing pavement layer.
And what do you think the life expectancy pothole patch and put in?
We've been telling folks that it'll be between 10 to 15 years, and that's what we expect. There again, I think there's gonna have to be some sealing of cracks and things like that to make it go beyond a 10-year period. But I feel comfortable with expecting a 10-year life out of that pavement.
Okay, so you get a 10-year for another 30, basically for another $25,000 to $30,000. We could do a complete reconstruct and have a road that should last 30 years. And our maintenance will be much less over the long haul.
We just don't have the money to do that, Mr. Lewin.
Yep, and I'm gonna jump in here, Larry. We just talked about this during our budget.
There. Now, he was talking about a reconstruction. That's very, very expensive. The other thing, when you're doing a reconstruction, if you do it too far, then guidelines include that you do the ditches and, you know, with the you know, so if you go too far,
Right, yeah, and I think what you're getting at is that depending upon the level of street improvement that you do, will trigger or not trigger certain guidelines that are required with regard to stormwater management.
Yes, that's right, reclamation. And so you want to kind of be between the lines because it can get very, very expensive to do a total reconstruct. And like I said, that patch in Joliet, it's the only decent piece of road on the whole thing, and it's been there 12, 15 years. It's unbelievable. But again, you know, when you have so many roads that are bad, and I didn't take a clip about Huber going on about the gas tax. Well, cities under 5,000 people do not get gas tax, neither do they get LGA, local
You're right, local government aid.
of $250,000. So we're without that. And I didn't do that, but let's play the next clip. It's just a real short one. It's me talking.
And what year is this clip from? Again,
This-
this is from the archives.
This is about the same year as the one you just saw, probably 2016, 2017.
Okay.
This same Let's play. process of patching, seal coating, and putting 2 inches down, that's working the Cusick Road also?
Potentially, we would have to look at it. We haven't taken any course.
Okay, no, that's fine. I just-
But I think it's a potential.
Okay, thank you, that's all I needed to know.
Yeah, good question. That is a good question. I think it's a fair question.
We were talking about just the overlay, and he said, well, that was a fair question. That said, you know, they just totally ignored that. Now the sky is falling. They're doing a patchwork quilt to these road projects, and it just doesn't make any sense. That's what I'm saying. You know, I mean, they should be into the 20th century. We're not horse and buggy anymore. I know up north, for example, by, what little town up north it was, by Malacca. Out in the township, they would pay citizens, if you'd go out and grade the road with your drag and your tractor, they'd give you so many dollars. Well, we're past that. We're in the 21st century.
And I think the other point to be made here too is that by showing those clips from your archive, it demonstrates that this issue is not like a newfound issue that the new council can say, oh gosh, we didn't know that this has been sprung upon us. It hasn't been sprung upon them. This has been an ongoing discussion for 3-4 years at least.
Well, it's probably been 10 years.
Right, and it's only now that they feel like they want to take the good ideas that you brought to the table, and now they want to claim them as their own. And that, in essence, is what they're doing without giving any credit to the fact that they're the ones who were dragging their feet all along.
Well, they changed the road policy. We did a whole show on that. And what they're sneakily doing is now the mayor and deputy mayor have to cough up the money for the big road construction. They don't want to have to pay for
Well,
it.
because they are on one of those projects slated to be completed for road improvement.
That's right. And so, and if they went into were current, they would just assess $25 per 100,000, and every person in the city would pay into it, the people on county roads and state roads as well as everyone else, and then all the roads could be rotationally upgraded. They already have a rating system. They know where the worst roads are. All they have to do then is develop a fund and this is the budget. We have $500,000 to work on roads this year.
And
in a matter
and
of 10 years, everything would be up to snuff.
Right, and approve the schedule, the scheduling of the phasing of the repairs.
So it's just crazy. In the half-an-hour sessions, they're not getting anything done.
Well, that's why I brought up that question. I mean, we heard now in another clip too, where he talks about they're going to have this in-depth council discussion, and that, of course, then begs that question: if you're having council meetings that are only lasting 30 to 40 minutes, when are you expecting that you're going to have the in-depth council discussions? Because the time for that was right then, when they had the material in their packet. That was the time for that in-depth discussion. Is it going to be next month, next year, in the back room? When And where will that in-depth
Well-
council discussion be?
Well, they operate by the mushroom syndrome. They keep everybody in the dark and feed them manure.
And probably violate the open meeting law because they're having their discussions
Which-
outside of public meetings.
Which I am in court for July 12th, and that's going to be a whole other story next month.
Right, and it's not against you, though.
No, it's not against me. We did a violation of open meeting lawsuit, and 3 out of the 4, or 1 out of the 4 things were upheld. It was supposed to go to trial, and the new judge totally turned it around. So it's going to be real interesting because we have a Supreme Court decision that backs our case.
Right.
But anyway, the last thing is somewhat humorous. Let me set you up for this. At the end of the meeting, Mayor Huber went off on a diatribe. Oh, we're not getting LGA and all the gas tax, and we're not getting a dime, so we have to get up to 5,000 people. So what we have to do is maybe we'll put it in the newsletter to make sure everybody is counted and let everybody know. And here, we'll play this last clip, and you'll see what his response is to this. You'll find it humorous.
Dig up or pull out from that?
Those are great questions, Danny. We've explored those, and that was my point about saying, look, we don't get this information. No one here is gonna see this information. It goes to the federal government. I don't care if you have 3 people living in your attic, as long as they're not tied up in your attic. I mean, you need to report these folks so that we can get to 5,000 if at all possible. And I'm pleading with you, do this, because we don't know about it. Now, to Denny's very good.
So in other words, if you're hiding people in your attic in the city of Grant,
Report them in the census because it's important so we can get our gas tax money. And he just doesn't want it to be tied up, though.
yeah,
That is, again, this is just crazy. If there would be such a term of lack of transparency, you look it up in the dictionary, there'd be a picture of Huber and Carr, because all this stuff just magically appears. It's never discussed. They have an ordinance that comes up. They basically tell the engineer and the planner to do whatever. The planner wasn't even there last time. So it's just kind of a joke. They tell people they don't need CUPs when they do. It's just
And
an
you know,
absolute
and-
travesty, and they keep re-electing these people basically on the basis because they wanted that hockey arena, which is going nowhere fast.
right. Well, and just in our last half a second here, I want to mention that when you don't require people to have conditional use permits, CUPs, when they should have CUPs, it actually sets a poor precedent for that municipality, because then when other people come to the community and they want to do similar uses of their property, they will simply point to all the other times that the municipality didn't require those properties to have a CUP, even though the requirement was on the books. And so it's not a good situation.
I would agree. Well, thank you very much. We'll come back next month and I'll show you more antics. Hopefully we'll have discovered all the people in the attic and we'll go from there.
Okay, thank you.
And that was my point about saying, look, we don't get this information. No one here is gonna see this information. It goes to the federal government. I don't care if you have 3 people living in your attic, as long as they're not tied up in your attic. I mean, you need to report these folks so that we can get to 5,000 if at all possible. And I'm pleading with you, do this.